So here's my story. I was an odd teenager, even between many other odd teenagers. I hated school, but I loved learning. And so I read everything I could about history and art, the two things I loved most. Um, and I was keenly aware of the fact that although I was filling my head with useless information, I was not actually learning any skills. And my friends around me were, most of them. Now, the year before I went to university, I took a year off. I went traveling and I went to see all these artworks that I had read so much about. Um, and I had no money, so I figured I'd make some money on the way. But noticed pretty quickly I had very few marketable skills. So I ended up doing very hard work for very little money and went broke. And one day I was in Athens and was so broke that I had a choice between going to the Acropolis and eating that day. So the choice was obvious. I went to the Acropolis and I had the time of my life. I loved it. The Acropolis is a very large pile of rubble, but it is the big pile of rubble to see. And I was enjoying myself, but I saw a group of tourists, three families, three fathers, mothers, and 6 teenage children that were bored out of their skulls. Mothers were trying to read them something from brochures they'd brought, and it wasn't working. And I got to talking to them, and I noticed that they just had no idea what they were looking at, and I told them some of it. And it fascinated them, because this is not just any pile of rubble. And I said, well, you know what, I'll tell you about it, but then you buy me lunch. And that's what I did. I told them all the stories about how this pile of rubble represents one of the biggest steps of mankind. How architecture and art developed incredibly right there, and social systems were invented there, political systems were invented right there, and all of that happened right after one of the coolest war stories in all of history happened right there. And I told them that, and they had the time of their lives. We ended up not just having lunch, but dinner as well, and we got drunk in their hotel, and they told some Americans that were sitting around there that they should go out with me the next day. And I did that for day after day for about 10 days, with ever increasing money I asked for this, and made enough money for quite a while to travel around again. And for the rest of the year, I would, whenever I went broke, I went to one of the big places to tour people around. Rome, Florence, Pompeii, Paris. Those were places where I made money. And I returned afterwards, went to university, studied the history of art. Still convinced I had no marketable skills. Was a tour guide in a museum where I eventually became a curator after I graduated. And wasn't very good at being a curator, because that actually requires skills, and I don't have any. But I loved talking about the collection. I loved touring people around it, and whenever anyone of consequence came by, I was the one to tour them around, because that's what you wanted to have as a museum. Eventually I left that museum and started looking for what I really wanted to do in life, and I didn't know, because I have no skills. And in the meantime, I would make some money by telling people stories about art, and then the coin dropped. That is my skill. I talk about art. I tell people the cool stories about art, and not just the dry history, but what happened, what made something become what it is, and I bring it to life. If you want to have fun with history and art, without it being easy, without easy jokes, but getting to the heart of it and feeling what it was about, then I'm the guy you should call. Now all I need is a way to market that. Dirk Muriel came to me and said, you need to do this, you need to start marketing this. And I finally, after years of them nagging me, I listened. So now that's what I'm doing.